Hello, this is attorney Vishrut Shelat, and today we're going to be discussing a very in-demand topic in the immigration community, and that is a topic of the EB2 visa. The EB2 visa is a special immigrant-based visa that allows a highly skilled employee from a foreign country to immigrate to the United States under a qualifying employer and then use their highly specialized skills to benefit both the employer and the country at hand. We'll be discussing the application process for this EB2 visa, the costs typically involved, and some of the common factors to consider before applying for the EB2 visa. So first of all, what is a EB2 visa? An EB2 visa is the employment-based second category visa that allows a foreign applicant to apply for a job in the United States. Unlike your other work visas, such as a H-1B visa or a O-1A visa, the EB2 visa is a permanent solution for immigration. Meaning that if the applicant successfully satisfies all the requirements of this visa and applies correctly with USCIS, then they can go on the green card track and get citizenship. Furthermore, unlike your traditional H-1B or O-1A visa, the EB2 visa is not tied to any one employer. So yes, the applicant does need to rely on an employer to get the sponsorship initially for this visa, but once they're approved and their application is successfully processed, they can switch employers very easily and continue their work and career down the line. So it's a great option for your highly skilled and specialized professionals. So unlike the H-1B visa, the EB2 visa does require a highly specialized resume. The applicant typically needs to have 5 years of work experience or more in their chosen profession. They need to have a specialized degree, generally above a bachelor's degree, so a master's degree, a PhD, etc. Or they need to have certificates showing tremendous work experience in their chosen field. Once they meet all of these requirements, they can develop a portfolio that they can then send to the USCIS. Typically, this portfolio involves a digital portfolio, meaning a website, sort of a catalog of their resume, certificates, achievements, publications, etc. And once this complete portfolio is developed, the applicant can then forward that information to their prospective employer if they're applying through that employer. And the employer must then submit this application with the help of an immigration attorney to USCIS, who then will review that application. Unlike the EB1 application, typically EB2 applicants cannot self-petition. Self-petitioning means that you petition for yourself, you don't rely on an employer, and you rely only on your experience. Typically, EB2 applicants cannot do this. However, there is one exception that allows them to do this, contrary to what I just said, and that is the National Interest Waiver. So the National Interest Waiver is a very unique and sort of highly specialized exception that allows your EB2 applicants to self-petition by saying, A, I'm a very unique individual and I have a proposed endeavor. That is a legal term, proposed endeavor. And what that means is they have a substantial merit and achievement in their back catalog that allows them to bypass all of their competitors for this application. They're saying, listen, I'm so amazingly set in my profession, I've achieved so much that just by looking at my application, you're going to see a proposed endeavor that benefits the United States and its national interest to remain competitive in the STEM fields. And I say STEM because typically those are the fields that are most granted for the National Interest Waiver. The second requirement is, of course, they're well positioned, meaning they're able to execute the endeavor. So it's not just enough that the applicant has an impressive resume and profile. They have to show that they have demonstrated the application of their skill sets. Have they made publications? Have they received commendations, achievements by their peers in their field? Do people know who they are in their home country? Can they sort of market that? And then after that, if they successfully apply for this National Interest Waiver, then they can state, I don't need an employer, I can apply, and I can self-petition. This saves them a lot of time and effort in sort of networking to find an employer. And then of course, also not requiring the perm labor certificate, which takes a good amount of time as a requirement that the employer must file. So many EB2 applicants try for the National Interest Waiver, but they don't get it. And the reason is that it's highly specialized, it's very hard to obtain, and it only sort of is given to the cream of crop for the EB2 applicants. Most EB2 applicants must rely on an employer, and that employer must apply for a perm labor certificate with the Department of Labor in order to successfully hire their EB2 applicant. So now that we've sort of talked about the requirements of the EB2 application, let's go into the fees, the main reason why many people don't apply for the EB2. And the main reason being that it's quite expensive. You see, for the EB2 application process, you generally have 3 forms that every applicant must file if they're applying within the United States. The first form is called the I-140, which is a petition for special alien worker. And that is done by the employer. And that is going to generally set an employer or an applicant back by $715. Again, these fees change all the time, so you have to be up to date by going on USCIS to check the latest fee. But as of time of recording this video, it's $715 for general filing on the USCIS fee calculator. Aside from that, you have your I-485, which comes next, which is called the adjustment of status, and which converts the initial I-140 application into the green card. This is what gives the permanent residency to the EB2 applicant. And that is the most expensive piece in the puzzle, and that's going to set employer or the applicant back by $1,440 for a general filing fee application on the USCIS website. Finally, you have your I-765, which is going to set you back $520 for a general application. And that is the EAD work permit. That's what allows you to actually work in the United States as an applicant. So those are your 3 base costs. Aside from that, there's many other costs. You have your medical exam, which is anywhere between $200 to $500. You also have your affidavit of support, which is just someone saying that they're going to take care of you financially while you're in the country. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, why you need that. And that's going to cost you $120 on average. Now, if you're applying outside the country, you need a form called a DS-260, which is the application form for international applicants, people who are not currently in the US and they are relying on this EB2 sponsorship to come into the US to begin with. Right? And that's going to cost you around $600 for a regular employer, $300 for a small time employer, and then $0 for nonprofits. The government wants to reward nonprofits in that sense, and I think that's fantastic. Aside from that, you have Uncle Sam's fee in USCIS, which is going to be $220 at the time of this video. So that's your basic outline for your fees. Now, there's one additional fee, and that's an optional fee called the premium processing fee. And the premium processing fee is $2,500. You may ask yourself, why would anyone want to pay that much money when it's already so expensive to apply for this form? Well, the reason being is that the EB2 takes a very long time in order to process successfully. The average wait time is anywhere from 10 months to 2 years. And I say that's the average, right? And that doesn't mean that it's going to take you 2 years average by the time you apply. What that means is from the time they actually open your application, it'll normally take that long. And that's a key distinction because there's a huge backlog of EB2 applications from previous years that haven't been attended to by the USCIS. So when your time really comes, that's how many years that would take. So what that really means is that a typical applicant can sometimes wait anywhere from 8 to 10 years. And especially if you're coming from a country like India or China, which has a huge backlog of applicants. I can speak from personal experience. My family came from India. We immigrated in 1999. The time was different, but it took us close to 13 years in order to get our EB2 application file to the green card stage. So now you understand why people do premium processing. The premium processing really speeds up the process by expediting the I-140 application, and that makes it much, much quicker. Application review that would normally take 10 months is now cut down to anywhere from 2 weeks, meaning 15 days, to 45 days, or essentially 1.5 months. That can be a huge time saver since the I-140 is the most important piece of the puzzle for the EB2 because that's what allows an applicant to stay here legally. The minute you apply for your EB2, you're able to stay in the country. You're free from any fears of overstaying your previous visa, for example, like a visitor's visa or whatever other visa an applicant came through. And as long as that I-140 is successfully processed, meaning you get a receipt number, the applicant is covered. Now, one of the most common reasons why people don't apply for the EB2 is a long wait time because the initial stage where they apply for this I-140 up until the 765 getting processed takes a long amount of time. So because they cannot work successfully, they have to depend on someone else in order to sort of finance their stay in the United States. If an applicant has a huge amount of personal savings, that's typically not a problem. If they have family members that they can rely on, not an issue. But if they are alone and they don't have any other connections in the country, it can become a financial obstacle that's extremely massive for the average applicant to overcome. So for that reason, typically most people who want to work in the United States but don't necessarily have the connections come on an H-1B visa or a O-1A visa if they're highly qualified, or they might come on a business visa network, and then once they develop the connections down the line, then they would apply for an EB2 or some other equivalent category later down the line. Aside from this, the EB2 is a very rewarding process. There's a reason why many people still decide to apply for it despite all the red tape they have to go through. And what I would recommend is that for any applicant who wants to apply for the EB2, always hire an immigration lawyer, because unlike your very straightforward forms, visa application forms like your visitor's visa, for example, this EB2 requires a substantive amount of understanding of immigration law and USCIS filing procedures in order to file successfully. One key reason for this is USCIS doesn't have an online application for the EB2 visa. It's all paper at this stage. And it's been that way since I was a young individual back when we immigrated to the United States. So it hasn't evolved very much for the application process. It's still very archaic, and for that reason, there can be a lot of frustration for an unprepared applicant for the EB2. So to summarize, in order to apply for the EB2 application, you have to be highly qualified, have a strong portfolio, and have to have a considerable amount of financial resources or connections in order to bide your time in the United States while you wait for your EB2 application to successfully process and get you your work permit and green card. Aside from that, you need extreme amount of patience and a will to sort of see the long-term goal. I hope this video has been helpful to you. And if you please have any questions, you can always reach out to us down the line. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.